Hello, I'm Darren Magee. Welcome to my mental health information and awareness channel. Now, today's slightly different because I've been asked to give an insight, some kind of insight into the fictional character Hannibal Lecter, the cannibalistic psychopath from the movie Manhunter, Silence of the Lambs, and the various sequels, TV series. Now, if you like this video, please consider subscribing to my channel for future updates on mental health information and awareness topics. Now, Hannibal Lecter, how close to reality is he? Well, first of all, I'm in no position to diagnose anybody, especially not a fictional character, but I would like to give an opinion based on personality types and behavioural characteristics. Now, the character has been played to date by three different actors, and each have brought their own interpretation, and I've enjoyed all of their performances to some degree. First of all, Brian Cox played him in the 1980s movie Manhunter, and that was an interpretation that came from the book Red Dragon. He played him very much as a brilliant psychiatrist, but also as a psychotic criminal, and he did that very well. Mads Mikkelsen played him in the television series for about 3 seasons, and he played him as very charismatic, aloof, immaculate, and brilliant. He was the therapist that his contemporaries both admired, respected, and even envied. His psychopath planned out what he wanted to do meticulously. He was very, very measured. There was little or no acting on impulse. He was what I would describe as very arachnid. Anthony Hopkins, he first of all played him in the movie Silence of the Lambs and the subsequent sequels and indeed prequels. And his take on the character is to be very charming, very beguiling, and the audience are pretty much rooting for him. In the subsequent movies, he seems to have some kind of superhuman strength and the ability to control animals with his mind and so on. He can perform brain surgery on someone. He can slice pieces of their brain off while they're still alive. And sometimes watching these, I can't help but feel, is he using magic? Is he using the force or something? But for today's interpretation, I'm going to focus on a scene from the Silence of the Lambs movie. It's the scene when Jodie Foster's character, Clarice Starling, meets him for the first time. I think this scene gets it brilliantly. It shows quite a bit of insight into the interactions with someone on the psychopathy scale. It also shows Lecter, who is a therapist, he's a psychiatrist. He has clinical and therapeutic insight. He is very intelligent, and the scene really shows that. Okay, so let's begin. So when Starling first arrives, she's insulted by one of the other inmates in the cell. She's disquieted, she's unsettled. Lecter knows this, but he is charming, he is pleasant, he is polite, he says good morning, he's very approachable. Starling asks if she can speak with him. Now, he knows she's already settled, and he plays on that. He replies, "You're one of Jack Crawford's, aren't you?" He is immediately undermining her autonomy. He is letting her know that he knows someone owns her. Now, in real life, is that any different from someone saying, asking a question like, "What is it you do?" "Oh, that's semi-skilled, isn't it?" It's setting a power balance, okay? He then asks to see her credentials, and he does this, he intimidates her. He asks her to move the ID closer to the window for him to see it. He sees she's uncomfortable, but he is politely insistent. He isn't asking for anything unreasonable, but he is showing that he is in control, not her. He is setting the relationship dynamic. Now, he's the one in the cell. She isn't, but he's the one in control. He is calling the shots because he knows that she wants something from him, so he's going to make her earn it. When he sees the ID, he tests her. "Oh, it expires in 1 week. You're not real FBI, are you?" Again, undermining her because he is in control. And she does, in that moment, she does what everybody does. She explains herself, that she's still in training. He then crosses another boundary just to show his self-importance. Crawford sent a trainee to me. Starling plays to his ego. "Yes, I'm here to learn from you. Maybe you can decide whether or not you think I'm qualified to do that." But again, what the scene shows is he has shown his intelligence and his insight. He recognizes what that is instantly, and he lets her know, "That's very slippery of you, Agent Starling." He asks her to sit, which she does, but he remains standing, so she has to look up at him while he's looking down on her. And knowing that she is unsettled, he then asks her what's clearly an uncomfortable question. He asks her about what the other patient shouted at her. He's fishing for information, something personal, something he can use against her. And she tells him what it was he said. Now, I'm not going to repeat what it was. You could watch the scene for yourself. But again, he shows his skill and his intelligence. Oh, he could smell that, could he? I cannot. And then he performs this kind of smelling action up at the little vent, you know. He identifies her makeup, skin cream and everything, just from the smell. He is invading her personal space without even leaving the cell. And the whole time, he's being pleasant, he's being polite. That whole scene is to have her feel uncomfortable and to keep her on the back foot as he remains calm. Now, she tries to recover a sense of control and she asks him about his drawing, and he discusses them briefly. Again, she's trying to appeal to his ego, and in that moment, she does. But it doesn't quite work, because as soon as she asks, will you have a look at my questionnaire, we get more insight from Lecter. He refuses it. He sees through that attempt. He calls it clumsy and even points out that she had been doing quite well up until now. Then he begins to test her on her insight into why she thinks the killer that they call Buffalo Bill, he skins his victims. But he's really more interested in her knowledge. He is testing her. Is she worthy of his attention? Also, the whole time he's listening to see is there anything he can pick up from her, which he does the whole time he's been studying her. And eventually, he asks her, give me the questionnaire, let me have a look at it. And he does it in a way that makes him seem quite magnanimous. It's good of him to help. It's as if the whole time he was teaching a child good manners, you know. When he looks at it, he insults the questioner. He insults her. The things he had picked up during their brief conversation, he gets this from her accent and so on, how she's dressed. He makes remarks about her cheap shoes and being just one generation away from poor white trash, and how she's just using the FBI to try to escape from all that. And she is shaken. But in that moment, she asserts herself. And she asks him, you know, can you point that high-powered perception of yours at yourself? No, you can't, because you're afraid. At that point, his ego is wounded. And even though he remains calm and he remains polite, he's still threatening her. He does that scene, that very famous scene, when he talks about the guy coming around for the census and he ate his liver and so on. The look on his face never changes. Then he tells her to leave. He's pretty much done with her. He has no further use for her. She has no value to him. He doesn't want an equal. There's no one equal to him. He is in the right. He is unique. He is special. He is the alpha. She is trash. Okay? Now, it is only because the guy in the next cell, you know, he's what Lecter calls rude and discourteous. Again, you can watch that scene for yourself to see what happens. It's only then he calls her back and offers to help, but he does it, letting her know that's the only reason he's doing it. But he will help her on his terms. And in that moment, we get to see the psychopath being impulsive. Not always being impulsive by being aggressive and lashing out violently, but acting impulsively. Now, that scene, I believe, shows the dynamic of a typical kind of interaction with someone on the psychopathy, narcissistic spectrum. So let's break it down. So first of all, there's charm, intelligence, social skills, beguiling. There's attentiveness, as he really just looks for information, something that he can use at a later date to wound, to offend, you know. There's a sense of importance, entitlement, being right, being in control. There's pushing boundaries, sometimes not in the most pleasant way, sometimes in very innocent ways, but pushing boundaries just to see how far he can go. Then there's pushing. There is the invasion of the personal space, whether it's physically or emotionally, but it's the pushing of that invasion of personal space, looking for some kind of a reaction. Then, when challenged or called out on something, there is the emotionally wounded. Okay? That's when the threats come. Either direct, intimidation, or aggression, whatever, or something is implied. Then there's the discarding, just, you're of no value to me, not interested in you. There's also the impulsiveness, which comes at the end, because no matter how measured, now, how controlled, no matter how socialized a psychopath is, they can still be very reactive, impulsive in some situations when feeling a lack of dominance or a lack of superiority or a lack of being in control. So they're my opinions on that scene, just on that scene alone, on Hannibal Lecter, how close he is to being a psychopath. As chilling as I think that scene is, I believe they have it pretty much right. Okay, now I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's been useful. If you have any comments or queries, I'd be very keen to hear them. Please use the comment box below. As I said earlier, please consider subscribing to my channel for future updates on mental health information topics. Just one last point. Hannibal Lecter, he's a psychiatrist, he's a therapist. Is it feasible for him to be a psychopath if he's in that role? Well, I'm a therapist, not a psychiatrist, but I'm a therapist. I like classical music, cooking. Thanks for watching. See you next time.